and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Today on the show is Professor Thakur S Powdyel. He served as Minister of Education for the Royal Government of Bhutan from 2008 to 2013, overseeing the Green Schools program, which is part of the implementation of Bhutan's Gross National Happiness Model. Now, he's in town for the National Climate Governance Summit 2024 under his capacity as an international advisory panel member. Professor Powdyel, thank you so much for being on the show with me. I'm hoping that
thank you so much.
To start our conversation, maybe you can explain to those of us who may not be so familiar with Bhutan about Bhutan's approach to gross national happiness.
Thank you very much indeed, Astro AWANI. Bhutan has a special place in the world in the sense that it is one of the smallest countries in the world, up in the Himalayas. But we believe that we have a role and a place and a worldview that we hold very dear. Bhutan's approach to development is defined by our holistic vision called gross national happiness. That was envisioned by the fourth king, His Majesty Dugyalpo Jigme Singye Wangchuk, when he was still in his teens, 16 going on 17. However, as young as he was in body, he was and has been a very wise and visionary king. The conventional model of development defined by gross domestic product tells you only a part of the story of development. It doesn't tell the whole story. GDP tells the story of the external world. It tells the material story, the economic story, the objective story. But life is more than materials. Life is more than economics and external development. Life is beautiful, is various, is subtle, is multi-layered, and it is very sophisticated. That is life. And because human beings make the society and the society is very sophisticated as well. It is multivarious. It is complex. It has so many subtle layers. So has the nation. The nation is a complex entity. And when you talk about development, only by using this highly reductionistic yardstick called domestic product, gross domestic product, you're going to get a very distorted view of development.
Right.
And if we want a more reliable, a more complete view of development, we have to take into account not only the material dimension of development, but there are so many non-material, non-economic, non-measurable quantities, elements, which actually make life more worthwhile, more meaningful, and much more fulfilling. Our emotional dimension, our psychological dimension, our aesthetic, spiritual dimension, our ethical, moral dimension. These dimensions are what make our life worth living. They produce the nuances, the points and counterpoints of our life, the highs and the lows, and all the complexities of life cannot be defined in material terms. But these are what make life worthwhile.
So, Professor Powdyel, when you were Education Minister, and you were the first democratically elected Minister of Education, when you were looking to implement education for gross national happiness, you had the concept of green schools and restorative education. Tell us about that.
pursuit of gross national happiness is an important national goal for Bhutan. This defines our outlook on the world and also our view of development. And when a nation has a big vision like gross national happiness, I call it our North Star. If a nation has a big North Star, the subsystems of that nation ought to embrace and advance that vision. And education is an extremely important subsystem of any nation, including that of Malaysia. That's why we thought that our whole education system must embrace that big national vision of gross national happiness. So in 2009, the Ministry of Education actually launched a big nationwide educational reform initiative called Educating for Gross National Happiness. And the strategy to implement that program was called Nurturing Green Schools as a means to an end, and the end was supposed to be, and still is, Green Bhutan. So Nurturing Green Schools for Green Bhutan. And even though the program is called Nurturing Green Schools, this program is not only about schools or about education. This program is about life. It's about holistic development. It's about human flourishing, societal flourishing. It's about sustainable development. So green is a color, but more importantly, it is a metaphor. It's a metaphor for anything and everything that supports life and sustains life. Human life, animal life, plant life, bird life, life in the sea, on land, in the sky, and everywhere in between. So anything and everything that supports and sustains life in its infinite variety is green. So we can have a green school, we can have a green home, green economy, green planning, green administration, green diplomacy, green legislation, green minds, green hearts, green outlook. So green is anything that supports life. And today when you're talking about environmental conservation, protection of Mother Nature, this outlook on education, green education, preparing young men and women to think beyond the confines of the curriculum as it is designed today, and restoring that old promise of education. Education is supposed to be an instrument to help young men and women find fulfillment, find meaning, find purpose. And today's education has, in a way, lost that grace.
Can you give me an example of how restorative education, how green education differs from contemporary education models? And I ask this because today there is such an emphasis on academic rigor in science and math and technology and languages. How does restorative education compare with that?
There is so much going on in the world in the name of education, but not all of that is education proper. In fact, many of it is uneducational or anti-educational. So what we need to do is restore some integrity in learning, some honor, some meaning and purpose in education. It is a pity that we have built schools, colleges, and universities around the world like nobody's business. However, we have to invest these institutions to which we collect all the young men and women, boys and girls, the most precious segment of the population, and keep them there for an extended period of time. When such a thing happens, we have to provide something more meaningful, something more purposeful, something more fulfilling to the children, young men and women of our societies, of our nations. That is why my green school is built on 8 levels of consciousness. And I call it the Sherik Mandala, the mandala of deep learning. So we have to restore that integrity, that respect, that honor in learning. Otherwise today, a lot of what goes on in the name of education is highly intellectual, mentalistic. It prepares people for careers, but not necessarily for life. That's why some of our more successful young men and women are not able to work as a member of the team. They are very lonely, very alienated, estranged, they are not able to find fulfillment in life, however successful they might be in their careers. Education is more than preparation for careers. Education is more about preparing for life, cultivating the goodness of life, celebrating the preciousness and the joy of life, finding meaning and fulfillment, reaching flourishing and fulfillment. That is the purpose of education.
Have you seen how green schools have had an impact on your students and their communities?
I think this intervention, this reform initiative called Educating for Gross National Happiness, implemented through the instrumentality of my green school, has produced some very positive impact on our children. We see that the language of discourse in our seats of learning has been changing very gradually. The relationship between the management and the staff and the teachers and the students has also been improving for the better. Student performance has also shown a very positive result. And school discipline has improved. The surrounding, the environment of the school itself, our institutions has also become a lot better. Our schools are not only physically greener, but also emotionally, psychologically, ethically, a lot greener. The attitude towards learning, I see, has improved. But it is a process. It is not an event.
Right.
And we hope that slowly and gradually, we will be able to achieve that purpose with which we started this program called Educating for Gross National Happiness.
Well, since it is a journey and it's not an event, right? How did you find challenges in wanting to implement this? Was it difficult to change the mindset from conventional education approach to learning to green schools?
Like all new journeys, this my Green Schools program, Educating for Gross National Happiness, also faced some challenges initially because just as pursuing the goal of gross national happiness is a lot more difficult and challenging than pursuing the GDP-dominated path to development, in the same way, educating for gross national happiness is a lot more challenging in the sense that this is more than preparing young men or women for examinations, for passing a degree, obtaining a degree, or going from one level to another. Educating for Gross National Happiness has 8 levels of consciousness that we need to awaken. And it begins with the most important element. It is called natural greenery. It is a kind of an invocation of the impulse of Mother Nature to bless us, human beings, learners, our teachers, and members of the society, citizens. So it begins by invoking the power and the blessings of Mother Nature. It awakens our sensibilities towards respecting the relationship between us, the human of the species, and Mother Nature. And today, I believe the best place to start education, teaching and learning is by respecting this relationship between us, the human of the species, and planet Earth. And perhaps we'll be able to avoid further global warming and climate change, and we'll be able to live in a much better world. So that's why initially it was not very comfortable for some of our fellow educators to understand the demands of this highly holistic and deep learning approach to education. We were looking at education from a very different angle under the auspices of Educating for GNH, Gross National Happiness. We were looking at education from within its soul. So it was, in a way, the restoration of the soul of education into everyday teaching and learning. And to that extent, it became challenging.
So when you take this approach, this mindset, this thinking, And in your role as an international advisory panel member for the National Climate Governance Summit, that's why we are here in KL today, what do you see as the most urgent climate governance reforms needed to address the climate crisis we're facing now?
Today, I believe that we have to work almost in the same way in which an artist works, a poet works, a visionary works. An artist mirrors the world as it is, but ends up by destroying the mirror and suggesting an alternative. So, global governance Malaysia has to acknowledge the imperfections of the world, filled with crises, natural crises, human-made crises, crises of all kinds, and above all, moral, ethical crises. And climate governance is primarily a function of environmental consciousness and the need to acknowledge the relationship between the human or the species and Mother Nature, because human beings have been the single most critical disruptor of the fine balance between us and Mother Nature. And I'm so glad that Climate Governance Malaysia has been playing this critical role in reminding our fellow citizens, people of the world, and governments of the need to respect this important, delicate balance between us, the human and the species, and Mother Nature. Today, I feel when it comes to education, Mother Nature provides the finest curriculum, the perfect curriculum. We can go back to nature for our perhaps most fulfilling, rewarding, meaningful learning. It provides the most delicate balance. And today the main problem has come about because of the fragmentation of this balance. And we are responsible for that, human beings. And it is important for us, especially as concerned citizens of our nations and of the world, to begin by restoring this balance. So the restoration of the balance, the restoration, the healing of the relationship, the broken relationships have to be healed, they have to be restored. And if we are humble enough, if we are willing enough to restore this balance, to redeem the broken relationships, we will have made a good beginning in terms of addressing global warming and climate change.
Do you see that in the way climate policies are being made and implemented to date? Do you see that balance being restored, that respect for the planet and the destruction we have caused?
In fact, participating in this very important discourse in Kuala Lumpur this time, I was greatly heartened to see the participation of all the important players that constitute this society. Policymakers, administrators, managers, chiefs of important organizations, diplomats, government functionaries, environmentalists, young people. So I saw a very collaborative approach to climate change this time round. And even though we are not there yet, I think the signs are very good. There is a very heartening realization that things are not right and that we have to work hard to right the wrong. And I think this is the right place to begin, acknowledging where things have gone wrong and be prepared to take a long-term view of the society, of ecology, of environment. Ultimately, it is our own survival, the survival of Mother Nature. We have to mend those broken relationships. And I'm very heartened to see that there is this growing realization, not only in the Malaysian society, but also around the world. I think there is learning the hard way, see. Yes, I think people know that the conventional mode of development is not sustainable. It is actually the obsession with the material world, obsession with material development that has brought us where we are now, see. And if we continue headlong in this rush, we're going to be no better off. So that is why it is important to make a break and turn the tide. If our generation doesn't do that, it'll be far too late. And year by year, actually moment by moment, the state of the world is actually becoming that much more vulnerable, that much more, in fact, challenging to repairs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we may be reaching a point where it could become too late.
Indeed.
When we think, so Bhutan embarked on this ambitious journey to change the way the country, the North Star, the guiding star of the country. Now it's been more than a decade that this has been...
More than 4 decades.
More than 4 decades that
Yes.
this has been implemented. When you think about the criticisms that other industrialized urban countries say that this does not, is not applicable to them, that this cannot be scaled to other countries, how do you respond to that? What do you think other countries can learn from the Bhutan experience in the setting of a capitalist world?
I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where we are. We could be in Bhutan, we could be in Malaysia, we could be in Canada or in the United Kingdom. As the human of the species, I think the deepest yearning, the most profound yearning of all human beings is for an experience of happiness. I've never met anybody so far who doesn't want to be happy. Yes. So all people across time and space want to be happy. So I feel that regardless of differences in systems, the fundamental desire of all human beings is to be happy. So if that is the case, governments have to create those conditions for people to experience well-being, a sense of happiness, a sense of security. So if Bhutan can sacrifice the economic benefits that can come from exploitation of the natural resources and moderate our wish to develop very fast materially, other more advanced countries can do so much more. They have the capacity, they have the resources. The only thing that they need is moderation, an element of mindfulness, thoughtful leadership. Mindful, thoughtful leadership, responsible, sincere leadership, leadership with integrity, leadership with courage can make a difference. Do we use up all the resources of our nations for us alone, to pander to our greed, to pander to the needs of the current generation? Or do we also care for future generations, our children, our children's children, their children, and beyond? Who will do that? See? So to say that this is not applicable to our system is to find an escapist route or to find an escape route. That is to not take responsibility, not to have the courage to make a commitment. So I feel as long as we have a vision, as long as we have a North Star, and if we are committed to that North Star, to that long-term vision, we will be able to find the resources. We will be able to galvanize our minds, our time, and the resources to at least proceed in that direction.
Professor, it's been such an honor speaking with you. Thank you for sharing your insights with me.
Thank you very much indeed. Terima kasih.
That's all we have for you in this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching.